I know it worked because I heard the ding noise that chat makes. And when I start the stream, a couple of my bots come into stream and make a comment. So we're live, guys. This this is amazing. Okay. First of all, I have to tell you, I did not think that I would ever manage to do this. But we have a fire pit outside, which I set up today. And the ring was sitting here forever. They used to burn in it before we moved in. But I gave it a spot in the yard where the trees have been cut down recently, put a bunch of rocks in it. And of course, we split, stacked, chainsawed, collected, dragged all of the firewood. So this is a very like self-sufficient win here. I'm very excited. But more than anything, I dragged all my crap out in the yard so I could read you a story on stream. So here we are, Lilywop, Washington. It is a beautiful summer night. We had weather of about 85 degrees today. I sat around and sweated a lot, but I also got some things done. It was lovely. I dragged my camera and my good microphone out here, did endless testing, and boy, I'm not sure still how great I did at the whole mic and camera setup, but it looks pretty decent to me on stream, and my voice test went pretty good, so here we are. I'm so stoked. We'll hang out and listen to the fire for a few and just kind of chill, enjoy the vibes. There's nothing like the roar of the fire. I hope that my good noise gating and EQ will keep any fireworks and voices and barking dogs and whatever comes along with living in a campground on the 3rd of July, but I'm sure you'll understand. I'm trying to remember when the last time we did a story by the fire. 1,000,000 years ago. Actual million. Yeah, I just heard a boom. But this is so many light years quieter than living in the city was. I mean, the cat doesn't even hide under the bed on the 4th of July. He has no fucks to give, and it is great. We used to spend like 3 weeks trying to coax him out from his hiding spots. He was surrounded. We were in the middle of the city of Seattle, and Queen Anne Hill is particularly known for its vibrant fireworks displays that are in no way sanctioned by any official bodies. Just a bunch of rich people with too much time on their hands, enough money to buy a lot of fireworks, and the desire not to care if they get caught because, frankly, nobody's looking to catch them. Anyways, living in a war zone, terrible. And now we're sitting outside on the 3rd of July, and our hearts are not racing. We're looking at the sky as it turns to a deep blue. The stars are starting to come out. And we will actually be able to see stars as long as there isn't cloud cover. Oh, I see a couple now. One of them might even be a planet. We'll have to see. So here we are, Powerful Dot's house. This is the kind of experience that I want to share more often. I want to drag more crap out into the yard and put on shows and let you come and chill with me and be cozy. We'll hang out, look at the fire. You know, I think sitting out here is going to be a little easier on my lungs too. Because sitting by the fireplace, I always felt like my throat was getting scritchy a little too quick. And, out here, I'm less likely to get quite so much smoke coming in at me. So it's a win all around. All right, just for the heck of it, I'll do a quick test. Be right back. Okay, so that little test let me know that latency is at about, I don't know, 10 seconds. That's really actually pretty good considering I'm watching my own stream on an iPad that is older than some of your children. So, you know, I'll take it. Hey, Rude Boy, glad to see you again. Oh my gosh, I am so like weirded out. I'm sitting outside streaming. Man, it feels nice though. It was so hot today. Well, we complained about it, so you know. I'm really curious if you can hear the dogs barking in the background. It's not a deal breaker. I was going to start reading a story pretty soon. If you have any interest in Sherlock Holmes, I'll stick around. We've gone through like basically the first chapter, and at least I think might have been the first couple chapters. The Sign of the Four. Oh, good. You don't hear any dogs. Nice. So basically, this young woman, Mary Morstad, comes to, not Morstad, Mary. Well, she ends up coming to Sherlock Holmes for help because she has an inheritance. She has a missing father, and somebody's been claiming that she deserves an inheritance, but it's mystery. They send her these pearls and riches. And so Sherlock starts investigating. He and Mary and Dr. Watson go to see this guy, Thaddeus Sholto, who they find out is the guy that was sending the pearls to Mary. And so he's got a story to tell. I guess we'll get into it. Mr. Thaddeus Sholto ceased and sat twitching on his luxurious settee. We all remained silent, with our thoughts upon the new development which the mysterious business had taken. Holmes was the first to spring to his feet. "You have done well, sir, from first to last," said he. "It is possible that we may be able to make you some small return by throwing some light upon that which is still dark to you. But, as Miss Morstan remarked just now, it is late, and we had best put the matter through without delay." Our new acquaintance very deliberately coiled up the tube of his hookah and produced from behind a curtain a very long, befrogged topcoat with astrakhan collar and cuffs. This he buttoned tightly up, in spite of the extreme closeness of the night, and finished his attire by putting on a rabbit-skin cap with hanging lappets, which covered the ears, so that no part of him was visible save his mobile and peaky face. "My health is somewhat fragile," he remarked, as he led the way down the passage. "I am compelled to be a valetudinarian." Who else wants me to Google that word? I want me to Google that word. Luckily, I'm reading off of a electronic device. A valetudinarian is a person who is unduly anxious about their health, which fits exactly with context. Awesome. Our cab was awaiting us outside, and our program was evidently prearranged, for the driver started off at once at a rapid pace. Right? I am so lucky to have Google at my side for these. The books I read are not copyrighted anymore because they're so old, and boy, the vocabulary does challenge you. Thaddeus Sholto talked incessantly, in a voice which rose high above the rattle of the wheels. Bartholomew is a clever fellow, said he. How do you think he found out where the treasure was? He had come to the conclusion that it was somewhere indoors. So he worked out all the cubic space of the house, made measurements everywhere, so that not 1 inch should be accounted for. Among other things, he found that the height of the building was 74 feet. But on adding together the heights of all the separate rooms and making every allowance for the space between, which he ascertained by boring, he could not bring the total to more than 75 feet. There were 4 feet unaccounted for. These could only be at the top of the building. He knocked a hole, therefore, in the lath and plaster ceiling in the highest room, and there, sure enough, he came upon another little garret above it, which had been sealed up and was known to no one. In the center stood the treasure, resting upon the rafters. He lowered it through the hole, and there it lies. He computes the value of the jewels at not less than 500,000 sterling. At the mention of this gigantic sum, all right, we got to Google again. How much is 500,000 sterling in 1890 compared to today? I'm going to grab my good phone for that. I used my crappy one for the Kindle because that's about all it can bear. There we go. How much is 500,000 sterling in 1890 in today's US dollars? Okay. There's a thing called in 2013 dollars. I'll take it. 2013 is close enough. It's closer than 1890. Oh, I see they have a space you can put in. Okay. So we want 500,000 sterling. UK. Wait, what's a sterling? It's like a British dollar from before the pound? No?
Sterling is the amount of silver in the metal.
It's the amount of silver. Okay. All right. So it's a silver measurement. You know what? This may be too mathy. So let's just say 500,000 sterling is a fuckload of money. I like that. Grandma Dot take a sip of her wine before she continues the story. Oh, see, we can see how much money that is because of the next line. At the mention of this gigantic sum, we all stared at one another, open-eyed. Miss Morstan, could we secure her rights, would change from a needy governess to the richest heiress in England. Surely it was the place of a loyal friend to rejoice at such news. Yet I am ashamed to say that selfishness took me by the soul and that my heart turned as heavy as lead within me. I stammered out some few halting words of congratulation, then sat downcast, with my head drooped, deaf to the babble of our new acquaintance. He was clearly a confirmed hypochondriac, and I was dreamily conscious that he was pouring forth interminable trains of symptoms and imploring information as to the composition and action of innumerable quack nostrums, some of which he bore about in a leather case in his pocket. I trust that he may not remember any of the answers which I gave him that night. Holmes declares that he overheard me caution him against the great danger of taking more than 2 drops of castor oil, while I recommended strychnine in large doses as a sedative. However that may be, I was certainly relieved when our cab pulled up with a jerk, and the coachman sprang down to open the door. "This, Miss Morstan, is Pondicherry Lodge," said Mr. Thaddeus Sholto as he handed her out. Oh, apparently we're on chapter 5, according to the book. The Tragedy of Pondicherry Lodge. It was nearly 11 o'clock when we reached this final stage of our night's adventures. We had left the damp fog of the great city behind us, and the night was fairly fine. A warm wind blew from the westward, and heavy clouds moved slowly across the sky, with half a moon peeping occasionally through the rifts. It was clear enough to see for some distance, but Thaddeus Sholto took down one of the side lamps from the carriage to give us a better light upon our way. Pondicherry Lodge stood in its own grounds, and was girt round with a very high stone wall, topped with broken glass. A single narrow iron-clamped door formed the only means of entrance. On this our guide knocked with a particular postman-like rat-tat. "Who is there?" cried a gruff voice from within. "It is I, McMurdo. You surely know my knock by this time." There was a grumbling sound and a clanking of jarring of keys. The door swung heavily back, and a short, deep-chested man stood in the opening, with the yellow light of the lantern shining upon his protruded face and twinkling, distrustful eyes. "That you, Mr. Thaddeus? But who are the others? I had no orders about them from the master." "No, McMurdo? You surprised me. I told my brother last night that I should bring some friends." "He ain't been out of his room today, Mr. Thaddeus, and I have no orders. You know very well that I must stick to regulations. I can let you in, but your friends must just stop where they are." This was an unexpected obstacle. Thaddeus Sholto looked about him in a perplexed and helpless manner. "This is too bad of you, McMurdo. If I guarantee them, that is enough for you. There is the young lady, too. She cannot wait on the public road at this hour." "Very sorry, Mr. Thaddeus," said the porter, inexorably. "Folk may be friends of yours, and yet no friend of the master's. He pays me well to do my duty, and my duty I'll do. I don't know none of your friends." "Oh, yes, you do, Mr. McMurdo," cried Sherlock Holmes, genially. "I don't think you can have forgotten me. Don't you remember the amateur who fought 3 rounds with you at Allison's room on the night of your benefit 4 years back?" "Not Mr. Sherlock Holmes!" roared the prize fighter. "God's truth, how could I have mistook you? If instead of standing there so quiet you had just stepped up and given me that cross hit of yours under the jaw, I'd have known you without question. Ah, you're one that has wasted your gifts, you have. You might have aimed high if you had joined in the fancy." "You see, Watson, if all else fails to me, I still have one of the scientific professions open to me," said Holmes, laughing. "Our friend won't keep us out in the cold now, I'm sure." "In you come, sir, in you come, you and your friends. Very sorry, Mr. Thaddeus, but orders are very strict. Had to be certain of your friends before I let them in." I love that bit. It says, "You should have just punched me. I would have known it was you." I think I'm going to fill my wine glass and grab a smoke real quick, but I will be back very shortly, and I'll see if I can use my voice command to make it work. Be right back. Just waiting to see if my screen confirms that it switched back. If not, you won't hear this. Hey, it worked. All right, I can see now. So I'm going to tend the fire a little bit. I need to poke it around, maybe pop another log or two. So I thought that would be fun to listen to and look at. So try and face the microphone the right direction even. I do have a log. All right. And then maybe a smaller one. Oh, that's the best part, isn't it? Getting that snappy, crackly sound. Never did get my smoke, but I figured I'll just sit here because it is so dark and I'm not on camera. We were just talking about what a perfect night this is. About how absolutely how lucky we are to be able to sit out in our yard on a 4th of July and have a fire and feel peaceful. It's great. Yeah, we don't get to see any fireworks, sadly. Everything takes place where geography gets in the way. Because we're kind of halfway up Hood Canal from Shelton. And so that's not visible to us because of the curves of the road. And then Seattle has mountains, I guess, or hills or whatever in the way. I think we heard or saw a little bit of something from maybe Tacoma fireworks last year or the year before. Do you remember, darling? I think we saw, maybe it might have been the reflection. It probably was the reflection of the fireworks. But it was like going off the clouds a little bit. But we lived close to the Space Needle for a long time, and we had opportunities to see the big fireworks show there a bunch of times. So I don't think I'm missing anything. I'm definitely not missing the crowds of people around that place. Oh, dear God. Oh, man, I wish I could teleport you out here to be in the slightly quieter. You must have it very, very intensely because it's a weekend, a long weekend. What is it, a Tuesday? And we're still on weekend, something like that? Oh, I'm glad they don't bug you. They used to drive me nuts. But nothing like the cat. Oh, that poor boy. I can see more stars, but the sky isn't quite dark enough yet to get a lot of detail. But I can make out the Big Dipper kind of up and behind me. Oh, right. There is also a really huge moon. A little low, looks huge, and blood red. It's really cool. I wish I could try to find a way to get a picture of it, but I can't haul the camera over there without it messing everything up. Oh, I'm so glad that you're used to the loud noises like that. That's a profession that'll definitely help. We saw the mama deer and the two baby deer that wander around our neighborhood today. And we discovered they were there because our neighbor has somebody over visiting and they brought their dog and they started yelling at their dog, come back, no, 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 bad boy. And we realized he was trying to go and possibly, check out the deer that were about a block away. And then they wandered down the hill behind our house and we could see the two fawns are really adorable. They're scruffy, spindly legs, baby deers. And but the mama, she had a pretty severe limp. One of her front legs was obviously troubling her a lot. So we're hoping to keep an eye on her and contact anybody if we need to. I don't know if there's like a wildlife department that you can go, yo, there's a deer that looks like it got hit by a car or something. But I will cross my fingers that we can do that. Next time we catch sight of her, we'll know where to point them. Oh, I bet German shepherds have a hell of a hunter instinct. Yep. They're fast too, aren't they? I think they're one of the faster dogs. They got like a real long wheelbase or paw base. Normally I have a little temperature display up on the screen, but I managed to nuke all of my previously set up scenes and stuff in my broadcasting software. So, I mean, heck, I'm starting fresh, right? Clean new interface. 6, 63, 68. Oh, my husband's telling me it's 68 with his fingers. That's still pretty warm. It feels very cool after the 80 something we had today, so it's good. I might even scooch a little closer to the fire, actually. See if I can do it without whacking too many things. All right. Cheap camp chair for the win. Well, I suppose we should see what Thaddeus Sholto and Sherlock Holmes and Mary Morstand are up to. I always forget this old ass iPhone that I read my books on doesn't have like a thumbprint unlock and it doesn't let you swipe up. You have to push the button like in the Stone Age. Okay. They've just entered the grounds. Inside, a gravel path wound through the desolate grounds to a huge clump of a house, square and prosaic, all plunged in shadow save where a moonbeam struck one corner and glimmered in a garret window. The vast size of the building, with its gloom and its deathly silence, struck a chill to the heart. Even Thaddeus Sholto seemed ill at ease, and the lantern quivered and rattled in his hand. I cannot understand it, he said. There must be some mistake. I distinctly told Bartholomew that we should be here, and yet there is no light in his window. I do not know what to make of it. Does he always guard the premises this way? Asked Holmes. Yes, he has followed my father's custom. He was the favorite son, you know, and I sometimes think that my father may have told him more than he ever told me. That is Bartholomew's window up there where the moonshine strikes. It is quite bright, but there is no light from within, I think. None, said Holmes, but I see the glint of a light in that little window beside the door. Ah, that is the housekeeper's room. That's where old Mrs. Burnstone sits. She can tell us all about it. But perhaps you would not mind waiting here for a moment or two, for if we all go in together and she has no word of our coming, she may be alarmed. But hush, what is that? He held up the lantern, and his hand shook until the circles of light flickered and wavered all around us. Miss Morstand seized my wrist, and we all stood with thumping hearts, straining our ears. From the great black house there sounded through the silent night the saddest and most pitiful of sounds, the shrill, broken whimpering of a frightened woman. "It is Mrs. Burnstone," said Sholto. "She's the only woman in the house. Wait here, I shall be back in a moment." He hurried for the door and knocked in his peculiar way. We could see a tall old woman admit him and sway with pleasure at the very sight of him. "Oh, Mr. Thaddeus, sir, I am so glad you have come. I'm so glad you've come." We heard her reiterated rejoicings until the door was closed and her voice died away into a muffled monotone. Our guide had left us the lantern. Holmes swung it slowly around and peered keenly at the house and at the great rubbish heaps which circumbered the grounds. Miss Morstan and I stood together, and her hand was in mine. A wondrous, subtle thing is love. For here were we two who had never seen each other before that day, between whom no word or even look of affection had ever passed. And yet now, in an hour of trouble, our hands instinctively sought for each other. I have marveled at it since, but at the time it seemed the most natural thing in the world. And as she has often told me, there was in her also the instinct to turn to me for comfort and protection. So we stood hand in hand, like two children, and there was peace in our hearts for all the dark things that surrounded us. "What a strange place," she said, looking round. "It looks as though all the moles in England had been let loose in it. I have seen something of the sort on the side of a hill near Ballarat, where the prospectors had been at work." Okay, it's bugging me. I'm not sitting right. I felt too far away from my microphone. So this neighborhood has a peculiar, I guess I would call it like an easement from the law, where the roads here don't count as public roads. And so people are allowed to drive their golf carts around. This neighborhood is like up the hill from a highway, and it's not like connected to anything else. You know, you just go up the hill to come into the neighborhood, and it's a bunch of little windy streets or whatever. And so people will scoot, golf cart, you know, any number of non-street legal vehicles. And I think it cements the feeling even more that we live in summer camp, because in summer camp, nobody drives a car. They drive golf carts and bicycles, and I don't know, cracks me up, but you can hear them occasionally. I'm going to sit and sip my drink for a minute. We do have more stars coming in. That's very nice. One of these days, I'm going to find out how to take pictures at night here. If I could just get a few stars into a photo, that would be super cool. We do kind of have like light from the city that bleeds into the sky. You know, we're not so far away from everything that it's like perfectly dark, but you know, it's a hell of a lot better than when we lived in civilization. Ooh, fire's talking to us. All right, let's get back into it. So Mary Morstan and Watson are falling in love. Very sweet. If you've ever seen the Sherlock show from the BBC, who was that showrunner that made it, that did all the Doctor Who? Anyways, that version of Mary Morstan is not this version of Mary Morstan. This version is a relatively normal person and not, well, I won't I won't spoil it just in case. 10-year-old show. Won't spoil it. Anyways, Mary says, "What a strange place," looking round. "It looks as all the moles in England had been let loose in it." Oh, wait, she said that already. "And from the same cause," said Holmes. "These are the traces of treasure seekers. You must remember that they were 6 years looking for it. No wonder that the grounds look like a gravel pit." At that moment, the door of the house burst open, and Thaddeus Sholto came running with his hands thrown forward and terror in his eyes. "There is something amiss with Bartholomew," he cried. "I am frightened. My nerves cannot stand it." He was indeed half blubbering with fear, and his twitching, feeble face, peeping out from the great astrakhan collar, had the helpless, appealing expression of a terrified child. "Come into the house," said Holmes in his crisp, firm way. "Yes, do," pleaded Thaddeus. "I really do not feel equal to giving directions." We all followed him into the housekeeper's room, which stood upon the left-hand side of the passage. The old woman was pacing up and down with a scared look and restless, picking fingers, but the sight of Miss Morstan appeared to have a soothing effect upon her. "God bless your sweet, calm face," she cried with an hysterical sob. "It does me good to see you. Oh, but I have been sorely tried this day." Our companion patted her thin, work-worn hand and murmured some few words of kindly, womanly comfort, which brought the color back into the other's bloodless cheeks. "Master has locked himself in and will not answer me," she explained. "All day I've waited to hear from him, for he often likes to be alone, but an hour ago I feared that something was amiss, so I went up and I peeped through the keyhole. You must go up, Mr. Thaddeus, you must go up and look for yourself. I have seen Mr. Bartholomew Sholto in joy and sorrow for 10 long years, but I never saw him with such a face on him as that." Sherlock Holmes took the lamp and led the way, for Thaddeus Sholto's teeth were chattering in his head. So shaken was he that I had to pass my hand under his arm as we went up the stairs, for his knees were trembling under him. Twice as we ascended, Holmes whipped his lens out of his pocket and carefully examined marks which appeared to me to be mere shapeless smudges of dust upon the coconut matting which served as a stair carpet. He walked slowly from step to step, holding the lamp, shooting keen glances to right and left. Miss Morstan had remained behind with the frightened housekeeper. The third flight of stairs ended in a straight passage of some length, with a great picture in Indian tapestry upon the right of it, and 3 doors upon the left. Holmes advanced along it in the same slow and methodical way, while we kept close at his heels, with our long black shadows streaming backwards down the corridor. The third door was that which we were seeking. Holmes knocked without receiving any answer, and then tried to turn the handle and force it open. It was locked on the inside, and by a powerful and broad bolt, as we could see when we set our lamp up against it. The key being turned, however, the hole was not entirely closed. Sherlock Holmes bent down to it and instantly rose again with a sharp intake of the breath. "There is something devilish in this, Watson," he said, more moved than I had ever seen him. "What do you make of it?" I stooped to the hole and recoiled in horror. Moonlight was streaming into the room, and it was bright with a vague and shifty radiance. Looking straight at me, and suspended as it were in the air, for all beneath was a shadow, there hung a face, the very face of our companion Thaddeus. There was the same high, shining head, the same circular bristle of red hair, the same bloodless countenance. The features were set, however, in a horrible smile, a fixed and unnatural grin, which in that still and moonlit room was more jarring to the nerves than any scowl or contortion. So like was the face to that of our little friend that I looked round at him to make sure that he was indeed with us. Then I recalled to mind that he had mentioned to us that he and his brother were twins. "This is terrible," I said to Holmes. "What is to be done?" "The door must come down," he answered, and springing against it, he put all his weight upon the lock. It creaked and groaned, but did not yield. Together we flung ourselves upon it once more, and this time it gave way with a sudden snap, and we found ourselves within Bartholomew Sholto's chamber. It appeared to have been fitted up as a chemical laboratory. A double line of glass stoppered bottles was drawn up on the wall opposite the door, and the table littered over with Bunsen burners, test tubes, and retorts. In the corners stood carboys of acid in wicker baskets. One of these appeared to leak or to have been broken, for a stream of dark-colored liquid had trickled out from it, and the air was heavy with a peculiarly can't talk. And the air was heavy with a peculiar. I'm just not going to say it. The air was heavy with a weird, pungent, tar-like odor. A set of steps stood at one side of the room, and in the midst of a litter of lath and plaster, above them, an opening in the ceiling large enough for a man to pass through. At the foot of the steps, a long coil of rope was thrown carelessly together. By the table, in a wooden armchair, the master of the house was seated all in a heap, with his head sunk upon his left shoulder, and that ghastly, inscrutable smile upon his face. He was stiff and cold, and had clearly been dead for many hours. It seemed to me that not only his features, but all of his limbs were twisted and turned in the most fantastic fashion. By his hand upon the table, there lay a peculiar instrument, a brown, close-grained stick with a stone head like a hammer, rudely lashed with coarse twine. Beside it was a torn sheet of notepaper with some words scrawled upon it. Holmes glanced at it and then handed it to me. I bet you're waiting for me to tell you what that paper said. In the light of the lantern, I read, with a thrill of horror, "The Sign of the Four." "In God's name, what does it all mean?" I asked. "It means murder," said he, stooping over the dead man. "I expected it. Look here." He pointed to what looked like a long, dark thorn stuck in the skin just above the ear. Heck yeah. I really wanted a drink of wine, too. So, drama and drink. It's a stream that's got everything. "It looks like a thorn," said I. "It is a thorn. You may pick it out, but be careful, for it is poisoned." I took it up between my finger and thumb. It came away from the skin so readily that hardly any mark was left behind. One tiny speck of blood showed where the puncture had been. "This is all an insoluble mystery to me," said I. "It grows darker instead of clearer." "On the contrary," Holmes answered, "it clears every instant. I only require a few missing links to have an entirely connected case." We had almost forgotten our companion's presence since we entered the chamber. He was still standing in the doorway, the very picture of terror, wringing his hands and moaning to himself. Suddenly, however, he broke out into a sharp, querulous cry. "The treasure is gone," he said. "They have robbed him of the treasure. There is the hole through which we lowered it. I helped him do it. I was the last person who saw him. I left him here last night, and I heard him lock the door as I came downstairs." "What time was that?" "It was 10 o'clock, and now he is dead, and the police will be called in, and I shall be suspected of having a hand in it. Oh, yes, I'm sure I shall. But you don't think so, gentlemen? Surely you don't think that is it likely that I would have brought you here if it were I? Oh, dear, I know that I shall go mad." He jerked his arms and stamped his feet in a kind of convulsive frenzy. "You have no reason for fear, Mr. Sholto," said Holmes kindly, putting his hand upon his shoulder. "Take my advice and drive down to the station to report this matter to the police. Offer to assist them in every way. We shall wait here until your return." The little man obeyed in a half stupefied fashion, and we heard him stumbling down the stairs in the dark. All right, chapter 6 will come in a minute. We'll drink and look at the stars. Maybe I'll have a smoke, poke the fire. Yeah. Snap, crackle, pop. Oh, I was looking for the rhododendron. Those smell so good. Ooh, that's going now. Quite. We needed a cozy. The breeze is starting to pick up, getting a little bit cooler out here. It's all right, though. I mean, that's kind of the magic of sitting around a fire is your front is too hot and your butt is too cold, and every once in a while you just rotate. Like a turkey on a spit. Yeah, I wonder if it would be boring or cool if I like had a bunch of photos of some of the animals that I see so that when I mention them, they would pop up on the screen. Like it could be the equivalent of getting dragged to watch your grandparents' vacation slideshow when you were 10, but it could be good. I don't know. We'll see. I'll figure it out. I'm rebuilding everything from my streaming collection so I can do whatever I want, right? Oh, I'm so glad I have you. If no one else, you're here. I did put together a neat little slideshow of baby animal photos for when I did a mobile games in bed stream, but I don't think I even got to use it before I ended up wiping all my stuff. But like most of the mobile games I play, I'm not going to pay for because screw you. And a lot of them have 30-second ads. And I don't want to be streaming a game and then have somebody have to watch a stupid phone ad with me. So I made a little slideshow of baby animal photos that I found on a free stock photo site and put it together to last 30 seconds with random photos and mute the audio. And so when I said a certain word, it would trigger the slideshow and cover up the phone. So that was pretty funny. That's how I started too. I was like, I don't know anything about setting all this stuff up. And then I started to like let it be a special interest. You need something to distract you. And so I started learning and I started learning, getting more and more complicated. And the baby animal slideshow really was the most complicated I'd gotten. Um, I don't know if you use OBS Studio, but that's my streaming software of choice. And there's a plugin called the Advanced Scene Switcher. And it is one of the most complicated things that I have ever set up. And it took me days to try and learn it. But eventually, what I made it do after fighting with it forever is when I did those mobile games streams, the mobile phone doesn't take up the whole screen, it's in the middle or whatever. And it can be portrait or landscape orientation. And I found out that you can use the advanced scene switcher to tell the the software that if the phone is oriented this way, up and down, it's a tall rectangle, the scene looks one way, and then if you turn the phone sideways, it gets into that other orientation, and the plugin knew that, and it would change the scene automatically to the sideways orientation. It was like crazy. Oh, dude, yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. It took me probably a year to be comfortable with OBS. But if you ever need any, like, tech advice on streaming stuff, even just with Twitch Studio, you can hit me up in the whispers or whatever. Because, like, even though the software is different, a lot of the tech is the same. And I've kind of graduated to helping people with OBS on the Discord and the Reddit and stuff. So happy to, like, throw anything out there if you need it. I can hear kind of a large fireworks show coming from what I assume is the direction of Bremerton. That might have been what we were able to see last year. Yeah, I took a break for a long time. I mean, you probably didn't see me around forever. But, that's all right. I've often said, like, it's not serious business for me, but if I do ever manage to, like, turn it into something I do, like, regularly, I don't want to do that until I feel like I'm really good at it. And so for now, streams when I feel like it and when the weather cooperates and whatnot. It works. I always have a good time. You get to hang out, chitty chat, look at a fire. And don't tell him I said this because he's sitting right across from me, but my husband loves the shit out of these story streams. He's always like, when are we gonna read the story again? Oh, I think I could use a shout out command too. Because there's so many people here. Let's get you some fans. Oh no, I can't see the keyboard. It's too dark. One of these days I'll set up a voice command for that. Okay. Boop. I've got this iPad with this weird little keyboard. Oh my God. My Twitch commands aren't working. I read that it was having some kind of difficulty the last couple of days. Unless shoutouts are no longer a thing. I don't know. All right. Take another sip and we'll get back to the story. Oh, yeah, that's the worst. Schedules and jobs and everything. I mean, I didn't even really start streaming until I stopped having a job. So, get it. 100%. Yeah. All right. Chapter 6. Sherlock Holmes gives a demonstration. Now, Watson, said Holmes, rubbing his hands, we have half an hour to ourselves. Let us make good use of it. My case is, as I have told you, almost complete, but we must not err on the side of overconfidence. Simple as the case seems now, there may be something deeper underlying it. Simple, I ejaculated. Surely, said he, with something of the air of a clinical professor expounding to his class. Just sit in the corner there, that your footprints may not complicate matters. Now, to work. In the first place, how did these folks come, and how did they go? The door has not been opened since last night. How of the window? He carried the lamp across to it, muttering his observations aloud the while, but addressing them to himself rather than to me. Window is snibbed on the inner side. Framework is solid. No hinges at the side. Let us open it. No water pipe near. Roof quite out of reach. Yet a man has mounted by window. It rained a little last night. Here is the print of a foot in mold upon the sill. And here is a circular muddy mark. And here again upon the floor, and again by the table. See here, Watson, this is really a very pretty demonstration. I looked at the round, well-defined muddy discs. This is not a footmark, said I. It is something much more valuable to us. It is the impression of a wooden stump. You see here on the sill is the boot mark, a heavy boot with the broad metal heel, and beside it is the mark of the timber toe. It is the wooden-legged man. Quite so. But there has been someone else, a very able and efficient ally. Could you scale that wall, Doctor? I looked out of the open window. The moon still shone brightly on that angle of the house. We were a good 60 feet from the ground, and looking where I could see no foothold, nor as much as a crevice in the brickwork. It is absolutely impossible, I answered. Without aid it is so. But suppose you had a friend up here who lowered you this good stout rope which I see in the corner, securing one end of it to the great hook in the wall. Then I think if you were an active man, you might swarm up, wooden leg and all. You would depart, of course, in the same fashion, and your ally would draw up the rope, untie it from the hook, shut the window, snib it on the inside, and get away in the way that he originally came. As a minor point, it may be noted, he continued, fingering the rope, that our wooden-legged friend, though a fair climber, was not a professional sailor. His hands were far from horny. My lens discloses more than one blood mark, especially toward the end of the rope, from which I gather that he slipped down with such velocity he took some skin off of his hand. This is all very well, said I, but the thing becomes much more unintelligible than ever. How about this mysterious ally? How came he into the room? Yes, the ally, repeated Holmes pensively. There are features of interest about this ally. He lifts the case from the regions of the commonplace. I fancy that this ally breaks fresh ground in the annals of crime in this country, though parallel cases suggest themselves from India and, if my memory serves me, from Senegambia. How came he then? I reiterated. The door is locked. The window is inaccessible. Was it through the chimney? The grate is much too small, he answered. I had already considered that possibility. How then? I persisted. You will not apply my precept, he said, shaking his head. How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. We know that he did not come through the door, the window, or the chimney. We know that he could not have been concealed in the room, as there is no concealment possible. Whence, then, did he come? He came through the hole in the roof, I cried. Of course he did. He must have done so. If you will have the kindness to hold the lamp for me, we shall now extend our searches to the room above, the secret room in which the treasure was found. He mounted the steps, and seizing a rafter with either hand, he swung himself up into the garret, and then lying on his face, he reached down for the lamp and held it while I followed him. The chamber in which we found ourselves was about 10 feet one way and 6 the other. The floor was formed by the rafters, with thin lath and plaster between, so that in walking one had to step from beam to beam. The roof ran up to the apex and was evidently the inner shell of the true roof of the house. There was no furniture of any sort, and the accumulated dust of years lay thick upon the floor. Here you see, said Sherlock Holmes, putting his hand against the sloping wall. This is a trap door which leads out onto the roof. I can press it back, and here is the roof itself, sloping at a gentle angle. This, then, is the way by which number 1 entered. Let us see if we can find any other traces of his individuality. Gonna grab a drink, sit and look at the stars again. Talking is hard work. Doesn't seem so. Oh, I think my camera has frozen. You know, it has happened once or twice. I'm going to pop inside and reset it real quick. I will be right back. All right, as soon as I'm sure that the stream knows I'm back, as I'm on a latency here, I'll do a little more fire tending. We'll poke, maybe pop another log on. I'm so happy with how this fire pit turned out. I literally just grabbed this ring that was sitting in the yard here and a bunch of rocks I found on the ground and dirt and just kind of piled them up around the inside and outside. Not bad. Okay, we are definitely back. Oh, thank goodness, I found the poker. That's a good sizzle. I've been waiting for this kind of thing since winter. No, since like last September. Haven't been able to sit outside since before that. Yeah, that worries me a little too. Our first summer here was, 2 years ago. So we had all those heat waves, it was like 108 degrees here. And we were so happy to have fall and winter come. We didn't know just how dark and cold it is. We're kind of on the side of the Olympic Mountains. So when the sun starts to set in the evening, it actually gets darker here earlier than it does other places just because we're in the shadow of the mountain range. And we struggled real hard with seasonal depression, with the lack of light. And then we ended up having a pretty awful winter, but it wasn't insane. Or was that the super awful one? No, that was the super awful one. Yeah, we had a snowstorm. We couldn't leave here for 2 weeks because the roads were too snowy and we're like up a hill. So if we tried to drive down the hill to leave the neighborhood, we would have fallen off the road. Um, and then the power was out for 6 days, and we didn't have like a generator or anything. We just had a little bit of firewood that the previous owners had left here. It was pretty rough. But then we thought last summer is going to be the year, right? It's going to be good. We won't have heat waves, we won't have craziness. And then last summer and spring, it was all wildfires. So we couldn't even hardly enjoy anything outside. Like, I'd try to go out and like do something like chop firewood, and it felt gross inside my lungs. And I was like, well, maybe I'd better probably not do that. And so yeah, this is kind of the first like ideal summer weather that we've experienced for like a significant period. And I hope it continues, but not enough to get us another ginormous snowstorm. But we got no worries about staying warm and having a fire now. Because now, unlike that first winter, we have a buttload of firewood now. Oh, oh my God. Don't worry. I'm okay. But this camp chair that I'm sitting in, I don't know if you can see my feet. I fell through the camp chair. The seat ripped out from under me, and my butt is on the ground now. I'm going to try and get up without disturbing things, but this is one for the record books. Okay, what if I feel a little stuck. Okay. Whew. Okay, I did it. I got out of the chair. I'm going to go fetch a new one. I'll be right back. Okay. New camp chair acquired from across the yard. Oh, nothing hurt more than pride. I took the fall on the most well padded part of my body, as it was the seat that broke and dropped me on the ground. So all is well. that was that was perfect timing, though, wasn't it? Just sitting here thinking of how peaceful and wonderful everything is, and then boom, chair right out from under you. That's all right. I'll enjoy the peace for a minute. The moon is still really low in the sky. It's like, I want to say it's like southeast, and it's got this orange cast to it. Looks really cool. Right? Totally instant karma. Also, probably some capitalism in there, you know. These chairs were probably $12 like 8 years ago. So, you know, probably not the greatest of construction quality. Probably my fault a little bit. There we go. That's a little tidier. Well, I guess we can get back to this story. I'll grab another drink of wine to fix my wounded pride. Excuse me. All right. We are investigating, find out who helped the one legged man get into Bartholomew Sholto's room and murder him. He held down the lamp to the floor, and as he did so, I saw for the second time that night a startled, surprised look come over his face. For myself, as I followed his gaze, my skin was cold under my clothes. The floor was covered thickly with the print of a naked foot, clear, well-defined, perfectly formed, but scarce half the size of an ordinary man. "Holmes," I said in a whisper, "a child has done the horrid thing." He had recovered his self-possession in an instant. "I was staggered for the moment," he said, "but the thing is quite natural. My memory failed me, or I should have been able to foretell it. There is nothing more to be learned here. Let us go down." "What is your theory, then, as to those footmarks?" I asked, eagerly, when we had regained the lower room once more. "My dear Watson, try a little analysis yourself," said he with a touch of impatience. "You know my methods. Apply them, and it will be instructive to compare results." "I cannot conceive anything which will cover the facts," I answered. "It soon will be clear enough to you soon," he said in an offhand way. "I think that there is nothing else of importance here, but I will look." He whipped out his lens and a tape measure, hurried about the room on his knees, measuring, comparing, examining, with his long, thin nose and only a few inches from the planks, and his beady eyes gleaming and deep-set like those of a bird. So swift, silent, and furtive were his movements, like those of a trained bloodhound picking out a scent, that I could not but think what a terrible criminal he would have made had he turned his energy and sagacity against the law instead of exerting them in its defense. As he hunted about, he kept muttering to himself, and finally he broke out into a loud crow of delight. "We are certainly in luck," said he. "We ought to have very little trouble now. Number 1 has had the misfortune to tread in creosote. You can see the outline of the edge of his small foot here at the side of this evil-smelling mess. The carboy has been cracked, you see, and the stuff has leaked out." "What then?" I asked. "Why, we have got him, that's all," said he. "I know a dog that would follow that scent to the world's end. If a pack can track a trailed herring across a shire, how far can a specially trained hound follow so pungent a smell as this? It sounds like the sum in the rule of 3. The answer should give us, but halloo, here are the accredited representatives of the law." Heavy steps and the clamor of loud voices were audible from below, and the hall door shut with a loud crash. "Before they come," said Holmes, "just put your hand here on this poor fellow's arm and here on his leg. What do you feel?" "The muscles are as hard as a board," I answered. "Quite so. They are in a state of extreme contraction, far exceeding the usual rigor mortis. Coupled with this distortion of his face, the Hippocratic smile, or risus sardonicus, as the old writers called it, what conclusion would it suggest to your mind?" "Death from some powerful vegetable alkaloid," I answered. "Some strychnine-like substance which would produce tetanus." That was the idea which occurred to me the instant I saw the drawn muscles of the face. On getting into the room, I at once looked for the means by which the poison had entered the system. As you saw, I discovered a thorn which had been driven or shot with no great force into the scalp. You observe that the part struck was that which would be turned towards the hole in the ceiling if the man were erect in his chair. Now examine the thorn." I took it gingerly and held it in the light of the lantern. It was long, sharp, and black, with a glazed look near the point, as though some gummy substance had dried upon it. The blunt end had been trimmed and rounded off with a knife. "Is that an English thorn?" he said. "No, it certainly is not." "With all these data, you should be able to draw some just inference. But here are the regulars, so the auxiliary forces may beat a retreat." As he spoke, the steps which had been coming nearer sounded loudly on the passage, and a very stout, portly man in a gray suit strode heavily into the room. He was red-faced, burly, and plethoric, with a pair of very small, twinkling eyes, which looked keenly out from between swollen and puffy pouches. He was closely followed by an inspector in uniform, and by the still palpitating Thaddeus Sholto. "Here's a business," he cried in a muffled, husky voice. "Here's a pretty business. But who are all of these? Why, this house seems to be as full as a rabbit warren." "I think you must recollect me, Mr. Altheny Jones," said Holmes quietly. "Why, of course I do," he wheezed. "It's Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the theorist. I remember you. I'll never forget how you lectured us all on causes and inferences and effects in the Bishopgate jewel case. It's true you set us on the right track, but you'll own now that it was more by good luck than by good guidance." "It was a piece of very simple reasoning." "Oh, come now, come. Never be ashamed to own up. But what is all this bad business, bad business? Stern facts here, no room for theories. How lucky that I happened to be out at Norwood over another case. I was at the station when the message arrived. What do you think the man died of?" "Oh, this is hardly a case for me to theorize over," said Holmes dryly. No, still we can't deny that you hit the nail on the head sometimes. Dear me, door locked, I understand. Jewels worth $500,000 missing. How was the window?" "Fastened, but there are steps on the sill." Well, if it was fastened, the steps could have nothing to do with the matter. That's common sense. Man might have died in a fit, but then the jewels are missing. I have a theory. These flashes come upon me at times. Just step outside, Sergeant. And you, Mr. Sholto, your friend can remain. What do you think of this, Holmes?" Sholto was, on his own confession, with his brother last night. The brother died in a fit, on which Sholto walked off with the treasure. How's that? On which a dead man very considerately got up and locked the door on the inside? There's a flaw there. Let us apply common sense to the matter. This Thaddeus Sholto was with his brother. There was a quarrel, so much we know. The brother is dead and the jewels are gone. So much also we know. No one saw the brother from the time Thaddeus left him. His bed had not been slept in. Thaddeus is evidently a most disturbed state of mind. His appearance is, well, not attractive. You see that I am weaving my web round Thaddeus. The net begins to close upon him." "You are not quite in possession of the facts yet," said Holmes. "This splinter of wood, which I have every reason to believe to be poisoned, was in the man's scalp, where you still see the mark. This card, inscribed as you see it, was on the table, and beside it lay this rather curious stone-headed instrument. How does that all fit into your theory?" "Confirms it in every respect," said the detective, pompously. "House is full of Indian curiosities. Thaddeus brought this up, and if the splinter be poisonous, Thaddeus may as well have made murderous use of it as any other man. The card is some hocus-pocus, a blind, as like as not. The only question is, how did he depart? Of course, here is a hole in the roof. With great activity, considering his bulk, he sprang up the steps and squeezed into the garret, and immediately afterwards we heard his exulting voice proclaiming he had found the trap door." "He can find something," remarked Holmes, shrugging his shoulders. "He has occasional glimpses of reason." Then he says something in French that I'm not going to try to... I would not pronounce it correctly at all, and it's missing a few letters. Anyways, I'm pretty sure I looked it up before, and this French phrase that Holmes uses is something like, the guy's got a lot of spirit, but he's kind of a dumbass. But in French, it sounds better. "You see," said Altheny Jones, reappearing down the steps again, "facts are better than mere theories. My view of the case is confirmed. There's a trap door communicating with the roof, and it's partly open." "It was I who opened it," said Holmes. Oh, indeed. You did notice it then. He seemed a little crestfallen at the discovery. Well, whoever noticed it, it shows how our gentleman got away. Inspector. Yes, sir, from the passage. Ask Mr. Sholto to step this way. Mr. Sholto, it is my duty to inform you that anything which you may say will be used against you. I arrest you in the Queen's name as being concerned in the death of your brother. There now, didn't I tell you? Cried the poor little man, throwing out his hands and looking from one to the other of us. Don't trouble yourself about it, Mr. Sholto, said Holmes. I think that I can engage to clear you of the charge. Don't promise too much, Mr. Theorist. Don't promise too much, snapped the detective. You may find it a harder matter than you think. Not only will I clear him, Mr. Jones, but I will make you a free present of the name and description of one of the two people who were in this room last night. His name, I have every reason to believe, is Jonathan Small. He is a poorly educated man, small, active, with his right leg off, and wearing a wooden stump, which is worn away upon the inner side. His left boot has a coarse, square-toed sole with an iron band round the heel. He's a middle-aged man, much sunburned, and has been a convict. These few indications may be of some assistance to you, coupled with the fact that there's a good deal of skin missing from the palm of his hand. The other man, asked Altheny Jones in a sneering voice, but impressed nonetheless, as I could easily see by the precision of his manner. Is a rather curious person, said Sherlock Holmes, turning upon his heel. I hope before very long to be able to introduce you to the pair of them. A word with you, Watson. Sounds like an ATV this time. Holmes led me out to the head of the stair. This unexpected occurrence, he said, has caused us rather to lose sight of the original purpose of our journey. I have just been thinking so, I answered. It is not right that Miss Morstan should remain in this stricken house. No, you must escort her home. She lives with Mrs. Cecil Forrester in Lower Camberwell, so it's not very far. I will wait for you here if you will drive out again, or perhaps you're too tired. By no means. I don't think I could rest until I know more of this fantastic business. I have seen something of the rough side of life, but I give you my word that this quick succession of strange surprises tonight has shaken my nerve completely. I should like, however, to see the matter through with you, now that I have got so far. Your presence will be of great service to me, he answered. We shall work the case out independently and leave this fellow Jones to exult over any mare's nest which he may choose to construct. When you have dropped Miss Morstan, I wish you to go on to number 3 Pinchin Lane, down near the water's edge at Lambeth. The third house on the right hand is a bird stuffer's. Sherman is the name. You will see a weasel holding a young rabbit in the window. Knock old Sherman up and tell him with my compliments that I want Toby at once. You will bring Toby back in the cab with you. A dog, I suppose. Yes, a queer mongrel, with a most amazing power of scent. I would rather have Toby's help than that of the whole detective force of London. I shall bring him then, said I. It is 1 now. I ought to be back before 3 if I can get a fresh horse. And I, said Holmes, shall see what I can learn from Mrs. Burnstone and from the Indian servant, who Mr. Thaddeus tells me sleeps in the next garret. Then I shall study the great Jones's method and listen to his not too delicate sarcasms. Then he says something in German, which is probably an insult at Jones again. And that gives us a lovely place to end for the night. It's nearly midnight. And we've just finished off chapter 6, and we'll start with chapter 7 next time. Thank you so much for hanging out, listening to me ramble and read stories, poke at the fire. It's been a lovely night. We'll have to do this again real soon. Now that I got a fire ring, We can do it as often as we want, as long as it's not raining. Can't drag all this junk outside in the rain. Thank you, Rude Boy. You have a good night, too. And I don't believe I set up a button or a voice command to stop the stream while I'm out here. So I will just go inside and end it. Good night.